Welcome, everyone. Another Wednesday of the Heavy Metallurgy Album Club is upon you. And I'm joined once again by three awesome co-hosts. Jim, how are you?
Doing good. Ready to see the glorious dead deliver the goods on Saturday night in Louisville.
Yep. Everybody's in the Louisville, Kentucky area Saturday night. We're playing a show with Primeval Well and Panopticon. So come on down. Tickets are still available. It's going to be a lot of people there. So don't dilly-dally on your tickets, I guess. Kellen, we missed you last week, but we pulled through. How are you?
I'm good. Happy to be back. Missed you last week, but looking forward to this one.
Did you do your homework, though? Do we have you so trained that you actually did your homework and gave it a cursory spin?
I did my homework. I did my best goth orchestral dancing. I'm all prepared. The performance art, it was. I missed a week, so I had to do extra credit to make sure I was ready for this one.
Well, I knew you were doing today, but I meant last week. Did you listen to last week's selection? Is the big question.
Yeah, I gave it a few listens actually, so I did not dive nearly deep as you guys did, but yeah, I listened to it.
TJ, how are you?
Just trying, I just had a nice nap and just trying to wake up.
You've got that post-nap glow about you for sure.
I do. I can see it right there. It's good.
Well, before we jump into this, I just want to say we are on Twitch. If that means anything to you, go to Twitch, sign up for that. And also we're on Instagram. If you want to follow the what's coming up on the show, I put up thumbnails on there, try to keep that current. So that's Heavy Metallurgy channel. Go subscribe to that. We are here tonight to talk about this record right here. Let me make myself bigger. Sirenia at 6s and 7s, which came out in 2002 on Napalm Records. The band's Norwegian. I'm going to jump into a little Wikipedia rant here. Sirenia is a Norwegian Gothic metal band from Stavanger, founded in 2001 by Morten Wieland. The band uses melodic instrumentals, synthesizers, and distorted guitars with female vocals, male death vocals, clean male vocals, a choir, and violins. The lyrics are concerned with human existence, emotion, and mental states. January 2001, Wieland, and founding member of Tristania, left the band. Oh, I'm sorry. He was a founding member of Tristania. He left the band. Within a few weeks, Wieland had a new band along with 3 other members. He had written material for Tristania's next release, but because of the split, he used it towards Sirenia's debut album at 6s and 7s, with other new material written in for it as well. The band entered the studio in November. By November and December, the band failed to find a suitable singer prior to the recording in France, so they hired a sessions female singer named Fabienne Gondamin. Which leads us to the album at hand. I'm kind of half expecting to be ducking some hot garbage being flung my way, but I'm interested to hear what y'all have to say about it. It's a little bit different for us. So, Jim, why don't you start off? What was your first initial thoughts?
Well, I won't say it's hot garbage, but kind of what I expected. I'm not really a fan of this symphonic. And they say goth. I'm kind of using quotes here. Metal. I just didn't really get that. I mean, there's a little bit of that. I think it's way more symphonic. I feel like to use a word that you've used before in describing production, Marty. I found it very sterile sounding in terms of like the production. The keyboards are, I think, a little over the top for me, bordering on silly at times, and kind of like really ripped away some of, I think, the emotion and darker intent that I think was underlying, the mission of the band. So I came away unsurprised and unconvinced. But having said that, I mean, you can't take away from the fact that there's a lot of talent here. Good musicianship, and great performance from Fabian, and also honestly the male death black vocals, he does a lot better a job. You know, I'm super not a fan of this kind of call response thing that was going on in early 2000s with like Lacuna Coil. A dude sings one line and a woman sings the next. I don't really understand that.
I don't like it either. I'm not a big Lacuna Coil fan.
But I will say that whereas I found like the Lacuna Coil guy's vocal like really annoying, and I just wanted to hear Christina Scabbia sing, this guy actually had a good harsh vocal, you know, that was tolerable. I think he was actually, you know, one of the better things about the listening experience. So first impressions, kind of like,
All right, Kellen.
No idea what to do with this album when I know I caught you pitching the record for last week's album club, and I just have no getting any bearing as to how to approach a record like this. So I'm not very familiar with symphonic metal, period. Gothic metals and / rock punk that was kind of talked about on the stream that you did with Festiman's Blood Box. So this is kind of left field for me.
That's why I picked it.
Exactly. And that was the intent, to ruffle some feathers or get people talking. So I came in with a little bit less potential bias. And what caught me off guard was I thought it would be a little bit more of a Gothic record, period. And from the first sort of song, I realized how much more of a metal record, specifically how much of an extreme metal record this would be. There's the Black Death. We'll get into that with the songwriting piece, but I kind of was surprised by how, as I listened to it, fundamentally, I became convinced it was first and foremost a metal record. Mm-hmm. And then how to sort of decipher all the influences and where its strengths and weaknesses were sort of through the week. I kind of made up my mind about, but initially, it kind of was a bit of surprise in a good way. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, TJ.
So generally, as a rule, when there's a wet woman on the album cover, that's usually a red flag about the content of the record. And with this one, you know, you see this submerged female, and my initial thought is great. You know, I mean, for instance, take a look at other records by other bands, such as record Round the Fur by the Deftones or Slippery When Wet. Not only is there wet women on the covers, but the records are just awful. So you're just like, oh man, you know. But that being said, yeah, I was, you know, yeah, he could have been Evanescence for sure too. Marty's heading in that direction, I think. But no,
I'll go and count that episode.
Yeah, but no, man, you know, then Marty, you know, he told me what he was picking kind of ahead of the class, you know, and I checked it out real quick and I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. And then he chimes in, he's like, how did you put it? He's like, I'm always surprised that I can't remember how the hell you put it. It was you you always expect the things I pick to suck. And it's like, and it's like, no, I'm just surprised that I like them. That's all. But no, you know, my first impression of this, you know, at first I wasn't sure. He said goth metal, and I do listen to some stuff like that. There are bands that embrace some of these elements that I do enjoy, you know, the female vocals, you know, somber moods, things like that, violins, symphonic stuff. I like the Septic Flesh, like the 2008 era, the band going for like those records that they put out, like the first two right around that era. I really like those a lot. What the hell I can't even think of the name of it right off the top of my head right now, but I thought those were really cool. Yes, I kept wanting to say something else. I listen to that a lot. And this record reminds me of that in a lot of ways, where those guys are far more immersed into death metal they really take a lot from the sound of this record or what have you. But there it is. Yeah, it's a great record. Just I listen to that a lot. So this was not anything foreign to me by any stretch. So initially my first impression was like, oh boy, but then I was surprised that it was better than I expected it to be.
Okay, obviously I picked it, and the funny thing is, when this came out in 2002, I got this sent to me as a promo, and Napalm Records during this whole era is very well known for putting hot women on their covers, whether it's a Mactatus album or a Siebenbergen or whatever the heck the name of that band was. But just about every album that came out in the early 2000s had a scantily clad lady on the cover. So I looked at it and went, oh my God, the fact that I put it on and it perked my interest. And then I actually went and bought the album and got rid of the CD promo of it is a testament to how I felt about it. And I made no bones about it. I love Amok from Sentenced, which to me is a metal band's interpretation or incorporation of a Fields of the Nephilim feel. This album to me strikes me as a Dimmu Borgir meets Floodland Vision Thing era Sisters of Mercy. And the thing that stands out for me, I typically am not a huge fan of lady vocals. I'm really picky. I really like her singing, which helps. And the thing that really captivates me about this record is how every single song is endlessly catchy. It is so well written, so catchy. Every song, every chorus is like an earworm, and the rest just kind of falls into place for me here. But let's talk about, I don't know if you guys had a chance to see, what the hell is that? My computer crashed before this, so everything is run amok here. Hold on one second. I just want to talk about, here it is. Gothic metal, Gothic influences mixed in with metal. How do you think the inclusion of Gothic metal music how do you think the inclusion of Gothic music affects the end result of metal? Does it create a unique atmosphere? Are the two styles of music well suited? And what about the combination of the cultures even? I mean, there are some similarities. Are they strange bedfellows or clove-toking brethren? And, really this, in the 2000s, this style of music, I remember it being quite fondly appreciated. And listening to an album like this, I see why. There's a lot of pop sensibility in the music structure, the song structures, and the melodic choruses and whatnot. But I don't know. What do you guys think about Gothic and metal working together? TJ, we'll start with you.
Well, I don't really see why. I mean, to me, the blending of it really is kind of, it makes perfect sense. I mean, you're dealing, metal music tends to, regale itself about the extreme, the dark, the mysterious, the avant-garde, the counterculture, whatever. And Gothic music really just kind of lends itself perfectly to all that. So the idea of blending the styles is really counterintuitive, really. I mean, it was, if it hadn't been done at one point, it was inevitably going to be done at another. And finding these bands. Now, granted, you get the early adopters of some of these styles. It threw a lot of people off, but then people also, but then the fans that have been with them, where they bring in the violins and the keyboards. I mean, I remember the first time I ever listened to a death metal band with a keyboard player in it, and I didn't know what to think at first, but then ended up being see, I try to think and then my brain locks up on me.
My brain.
What's left of it? That Florida band. Anyway, but it was. But the bands that were doing it early on, it was. I mean, metal is what it is, and they're always people looking to push boundaries and stuff. And the Gothic is just, I think that stuff fits into it perfectly. And then today, you have all the bands that are out there that are doing their thing with it, and there's nothing. I don't think there's a lot of new ground to be covered with it as far as Eternus. There it is.
Nocturnus.
No, not Nocturnus. Yeah, there we go. God, I should have took a longer nap. So, yeah, I just don't, I don't really see I don't have any real issues about it. I know for me as I started, early on when I was younger, I did some of the bands I didn't listen to it, when My Dying Bride changed their style, I didn't listen to that band for a long time because of it. And then came back and all of a sudden discovered my tastes had evolved. And now they're one of my favorite bands. And, while they're not necessarily, I mean, they embrace some of the Gothic in approach. They're not, not buying, they're not, I wouldn't put them in this category, but it's still, it's matter of taste with anything. But I think it was a perfect bedfellows, really. If that any of that rambling nonsense made any sense. Yeah.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah, I'm not, a big enough fan of goth music to really speak intelligently to this question. It's hard for me to pick, that kind of stuff out. Like the deepest I ever got into goth is I like Typo Negative. I like The Cure. I don't know, it's somewhere in between there. Does that really fall or make sense? But I do like post-punk stuff and things like that, if that has any crossover into that realm. But, what I hear mainly on this, I hear a lot more of the orchestrations. And I do hear it like in the sort of like when he's doing kind of like the lower register, clean singing male vocal, like I hear the goth there and maybe some elements of Fabian singing kind of do a little bit of the Susie and the Banshee thing here and there, which is great. So I think that when they go for like what I consider in my very limited knowledge of that genre to be the core elements of what make goth, which are the vocal phrasings and kind of like just more of the minor key choruses and stuff like that. That's when this band particularly succeeds. But when they go off of that and they just fully jump into the very obvious keyboard orchestrations and stuff like that, and it just gets goofy to me. The violin playing, I will say, is really, really well done throughout, and in some cases even saves the songs here and there. But speaking about your question in general, like I said, I'm all for, an infusion of different genres into metal. I think that it keeps it fresh, and sometimes out of that, can become bands that I really, really love a lot, which again, true goth fans slap me around, but I feel like Typo Negative is a great example of that. As I just mentioned, October Rest is one of my Desert Island albums. I absolutely love that album, every note of it from start to finish. I think it's fantastic. And the boob, the vibe, everything. I think it's their masterpiece. And so I don't think that album would have ever happened if goth and metal, if they hadn't brought those worlds together, and, of course they got the infusion of hardcore and all the other stuff too going on. But I think that's when it really succeeds. I think Typo was more about like that, again, that vocal delivery, more of the mood, sort of the atonal but catchy choruses. Here I think that a lot of the darkness that maybe this guy was trying to, from Tristania was trying to create, it gets overwhelmed by all of this orchestration, and it makes it sound, too happy to me, which is, I think, conversely, not what you're trying to go for. So while I feel like there's a big like diversity in execution, where I can look at Typo Negative, I think they do it perfectly. I think this band, doesn't do it perfectly. I think that I'm really glad that the crossover between goth and metal exists, and listening to this stuff, it's like, maybe I should go back and listen to some latter era Paradise Lost, give it a chance or something. You know what I mean? Because I really just kind of ignored that, but, playing this on repeat, all week, getting some notes down, it's kind of made me think like, I should push myself a little bit harder because it might be something cool to discover. So good. I'm all for it.
Right on. Kellen.
Yeah, so I liked. I think Life Eternal made a comment. He included Funeral as a band that is a death doom or funeral doom project that includes Gothic elements, and I think that's almost synonymous to some degree with a lot of that genre. Is the inclusion, especially like the latter, past the first few records, the Gothic influence on that genre becomes very prominent. But more specifically, if you're asking, how much Gothic music plays a role in metal, I think as it regards to this record, I think it's rather marginal. It's a small piece. I think actually what makes this record so catchy is actually the orchestral elements to it. So it's a much more of a composition record, which I think goth is to some degree, while sounding totally different, is something like psychedelic music, which is not necessarily a like formal way of playing as much as it is like an emotion that you elicit. Now, to Jim's point, I associate goth much more as like a branch of post-punk.
Yeah.
But what makes it different and very specific is that kind of emotional quality, right? It was far more interpersonal, right? And it wasn't just a look and a style, but like the emotional tenor of those records was something a little bit different than some other post-punk bands that were much more upbeat or just noisy in general, right? They're solemn and melancholy, and it was a way that I think to some to kind of explore a different branch of the tree that was very different than like punk and post-punk that had preceded it. And I think that's sort of the connection in terms of sonic narrative, if you will, right? Funeral doom, death doom that plays in that space is exploring the same kind of themes, narratives, not just musically, but also lyrically, thematically on this record. So that's probably the greatest crossover in terms of how to include it and where it works well. How well like it moves into the other part. I'm glad you brought this up, this era, because it's also a very specific era in black metal's history where like symphonic black metal is sort of pulling from a lot of goth sort of visual aesthetic.
Cradle of Filth, Dimmu, all that stuff.
It's huge at this point in time in the early 2000s, right? So anyway, I think it's important to point that into like when I was listening to this record, those are the major pieces I felt sort of converging, is like that symphonic kind of frilly black metal from the early 2000s and also the like sad, mournful death doom combining to, I guess, what had preceded this band. You talked about the band's history. Is it where the Tristian? What was it? The
Tristiana
name of it? Tristiana. Yeah, I don't know anything about them other than they were
Tristania. Sorry.
Yeah, it was even, I guess, more symphonic metal, and this is a heavier version. I guess is what I found out, but I think Gothic themes, to kind of loop this back together, Gothic themes in terms of like its literary tradition and historical tradition, they're 100% part of like the metal whatever pantheon in terms of artistic things to explore. How well the music suits, though, I think is much more challenging. I think it is, because it is so specific in a kind of punk or post-punk sound. Including it in this record, if it had dominated the presence, I would have a very different reaction to listening to it. If you had thrown in, The Cure with, the rest of this record, the symphonic elements, it would have been too much of a gulf, two disparate ends sonically.
Yeah.
Or I feel it's the goth elements included on this record are just enough to kind of elicit that kind of suggestion or connection to that era, but it doesn't dominate the identity of this band, at least not on this record.
Well, for me, I listened to this record and, it is predominantly a metal record, 100%. But I listened to it, and especially when all the choirs, the vocal choirs kick in, and some of the synth tones, even though the synth work reminds me of Dimmu Borgir, early Dimmu for sure. It sounds like Morton's take on, if you're familiar at all with the Sisters of Mercy album Floodland, there's a song on there called This Corrosion. It's got a lot of ladies singing on it, a ton of big choirs. It sounds like a metalhead's take on trying to recreate that song. It's catchy. It's kind of in a pop sensibility. It still has dark overtones, undertones, and I like the inclusion. And to echo everybody's ideas here, yeah, I'm all for including other musical styles in with metal for sure. Gothic inclusion into metal is typically it lands on the more commercial side of the tracks. It always does. You look at Cradle of Filth. For a black metal band, they're a pretty commercial band. They're pretty commercial. Dimmu, their first couple albums, their first 3 or 4 are very excellent Norwegian black metal albums, and they maintain that, and they, you know, even work in some thrashy elements, but their look and the naked ladies on the inserts, it's very much landing on the commercial side of goth. And you know, someone even mentioned Martin Ayen from Celtic Frost. You know, Into the Pandemonium obviously had some goth ideas going on, even though I've been yelled at it before. That album is a mess to me. That album, it was like all this wanting to try all these really cool ideas, just be bold and try something new, and it didn't often work for me. That band finally clicked with Monotheist. I think that album is their art piece. That is their gothic avant-garde masterpiece. When they're kids writing that stuff, it was bold, but it didn't click yet. I think the inclusion is fine. It's great. I don't always land on the side of the commercial stuff, but you know, I listened to this record a good 20 times this week, and it kind of goes in with the power metal stuff I've been listening to. It's very upbeat. It's an upbeat record. You know, you think of goth as being downtrodden and depressing, which, you know, certain albums by The Cure, some Susie stuff can be that way, but hers is a little more upbeat. And
I covered it.
no, you didn't. Right into the
I
mic.
did. I don't know. Listen, I'm just trying to breathe over
We're
here.
listening just fine.
Get ready for the show. Get ready for the show.
Listen to me slowly die of suffocation. You're welcome.
I'm gonna be looking for these sounds from the mic. On
he
Saturdays.
does. He fires them through the PA too at bazillion decibels. Yeah. Clears his throat. Make sure everybody hears. Anyway, I think the combination is fine. I'm all for it. It seems like there's still, you know, bands like Epica, you know, bands like Camelot. They're not European, but they do have some gothic elements mixed in with their power metal. It's still alive and well, though the popularity seems to, like I said in the thing, wax and wane. But this record to me, it still holds up really well in spite of, you know, there's some poppy stuff going on here and there. It's just so catchy. But anyway, let's talk about the musicality and composition of At Sixes and Sevens. You want to start, Kellen?
Sure. So we kind of talked about the musical influences on this record. Yeah, and just to kind of retrace my steps, it is very much they're taking some aspects of symphonic black metal, this sort of death metal / death doom side of things, and this symphonic thing, which is past anything that I've really ever heard in a black metal context. And to the credit of what I do think that kind of ability to shift gears in between genres is one of their strengths, is they can introduce something in a sort of minimal context, and then they'll just embellish it by introducing a new genre. And then here we arrive at the chorus, and there's 500 keyboards and strings and multiple singers, and like there's already all this stuff going on. So to the point about it being catchy, though, I kind of let this album just play through a bunch, and I didn't really, at least initially, find like single songs that stood out to me, but I never got bored. So they're really good at, or this guy is incredibly talented at doing a lot, but it never sounded exhausting or dynamically challenging. All of it kind of was easy to consume for the entire listen. So whether it was like the best thing in the world, I didn't really gravitate towards that, but it also wasn't like exhausting like some extreme metal listens are. It wasn't over the top sort of cheesy for me in the way that some power metal would potentially be. So in that regard, really good songwriting. I did also want to add, I think it's probably this era. There are times in this where like there's a little bit of like electronica trickling in, like
Mhm.
there's some little added pieces. And on the song, I think it's On the Wane. It feels like they stole
the
the
one.
it feels like they stole the keyboard from the X-Files. That doo, like that the same keyboard.
Actually, that was in a Manica.
Okay.
That I wrote down here makes me think of the X Files.
Yeah, me too. But
Yeah.
there is some dancing, technical, techno type weirdness at the beginning of On the Wane that immediately turned me off. We'll get to that.
Just gotta shake your funky butt, Clifton. Shake that funky butt.
Yeah. But I mean, in terms of I came away impressed that it was so much going on in this record. They were able to sort of balance it. It kind of felt like you ever, I don't know, the time period in your life when you went to like a really, like with your close friends, you went to a house party and you didn't have a whole lot of room to work with. Like but everyone was close. And so you didn't mind sort of rubbing shoulders with all your good friends while your party. Where there's some parties you went to where like someone was really bad news and you're like, let's get the hell out of here. There's something bad is going to happen, right? Like
we drank our kegs in the woods, bro.
All right,
like normal hillbillies.
Everybody, at least like the ability to compose everything collectively here, I thought was one of the strengths in terms of the songwriting on this record. So, yeah,
right on. Jim.
The guy is obviously a good musician. He knows how to layer, and he's a primary songwriter. This dude, what's his name? Morton Veland. He knows how to layer things and all that kind of stuff. But it comes all together to me. And someone in the comments was talking about AI generated songs. This album to me could have been AI generated. Everything sounds programmed. It doesn't sound. There's no organicness to this to me, except for the violin and Fabian's voice. Everything else to me sounds pretty contrived. Like I said, the drums are programmed. The bass is really, really, really simple.
The drums are really bad sounding. I would agree with that.
Yeah, the drums are very simple, and so is the bass lines. And I guess, maybe that's not so bad if this was just a goth music album. I mean, they're not known to be like running scales, at 100 beats per second in that style of music. But still, I just feel like, at the end of the day, this is a metal album, and a little more power could have been appreciated. A little more attention to the drums, that they sound pretty rudimentary. And if you're going to do an album this layered, I think a little bit more variety, even if you're going to program them fine, but do something a little more layered. Majesty's, this is not, in terms of that, level of drum programming. So it definitely stood out to me as being, kind of rough. I didn't like, the sound of the bass either. They don't even usually have a bass player. I read on Metal Archives that they play bass tracks, which also means they must play to a click track, which to me also takes away, again, the organic feel of it, knowing that it sounds like everything that they do on stage and in the studio is mechanized, and that's okay. You know what I mean? If that's your thing. But for me as a metal fan, when I'm listening to a quasi metal band, I want to hear as little of that sort of like, machinery, as possible. And I certainly don't want to go to a show and see that. So even though I can say that from, compositionally, this guy has got some skills, this does not move me at all. Like, I feel like, when I'm listening to metal, I don't want to hear artifice. I want to hear sincerity. And to me, this is all about artifice. I can listen to power metal, and because there's a self-awareness with power metal, like we know we're singing about dragons and we know we're happy. Everybody knows that. We get that. Exactly. We're hoisting our swords high. We're drinking mead, whatever. Everybody knows it's all bullshit, but it's fun and we're okay with it. But I feel like
I'm not okay.
This is that, yeah, except for TJ. Exactly, man. But I feel like, this right here is, an attempt to, use those same elements, that bombasticness, that heavy orchestration, but try to, make it like serious and dark. And instead it comes off to me way more plastic than a power metal album would, because power metal, I think, is honest about where it's coming from. And it's like, here it is. We don't give a shit. Yeah, man. Yeah, we layered 20 tracks on a Blind Guardian song. We can't pull it off live, but you're going to go see it anyway. I mean, it's a different, it's like, it sounds like I'm like, being hypocritical, but for my own feeling about it, I'm not, because I feel like they're just, it's all out on the table. We're being honest, but I feel like the presentation of this is like, that there's some darkness and sincerity to it. I'm sorry, man. I just don't believe it, so purely from a musical standpoint, is the guy talented? Yes. But what he's selling, man, I'm just not buying.
Right on. And honestly, I would even say that I get that the darkness that he tries to muster on here feels very manufactured. For me, it's just about the catchy songs.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and I wanna ride on Jim's opinion there a little bit. I kind of agree with that. There is a synthetic vibe that runs through this. The drums the drums sound completely out of a can. The
terrible
guitar,
sound.
yeah, we're jumping into production a little bit, but the guitar tones, I mean, it sounds like maybe they're using an early 2000s plug-in or something, when they were still kind of primitive. They were starting to come into their own, but it just doesn't sound, it's fizzy. There's definitely some issues. I mean, as far as the musicality and stuff, what did I write? Catchy pop structures that blend with more searing metal parts and soaring melodies. There's good hooks in this. Too many uplifting passages. You guys always kind of default to this happy. It's like, well, it's uplifting. It's happy, right? I always say uplifting. They always go for, instead of going for the flats, they go for the sharps and those sort of things. And major versus minor scales, things like that. And so it lends them into the more lofty heights of certain things. And I think it kind of kills some of the vibe that they're trying to go for at times. And so I think, overall, I think that, they crafted it really well, and the talent really shines here. It's not the I did like this record, but I just had, it was, like Jim was saying, there's just this kind of, I don't know, they kind of lose it in places where, they think they could have sold it better. And, with the vibe that it kind of falls off. Everything's, and there is a sameness too, that it just kind of runs through, just, from front to back. Everything kind of sits in one place and kind of does what it does. So it's not terrible by any stretch, and definitely talented. But I think that there's kind of, they're dancing around a little bit on stuff when they could have, maybe sunk in a little deeper on some of the heavier elements and stuff. But yeah.
For me, like we talked about Jim's point. Yeah. It seems like the trying to add an element of melancholy or darkness to this is an afterthought. It's like, because there is a power metal quality to this in the riffs. I mean, this album is insane. I've listened to it 20 times this week. I was just in the mood for it. I listened to it again when we did the that goth episode a couple weeks ago, and I was reminded of how much I like the record, and it's because the songwriting is so endlessly catchy. And not only is it catchy, it's very playful in the way he messes around with those arpeggiated synth things. You know, it's uplifted. It's hard not to be uplifted listening to some of these songs. And the motion to get to the chorus it's very flowing, well considered. When the chorus hits, it's the biggest hook it's kind of the way pop music is structured. It's a very memorable hook, and the way the vocals interact with the chord progressions and the way they interact with the choruses, they really sell the choruses. The interaction between that Beauty and the Beast, you know, the clean lady singing, and then, you know, the gruff, even though he's growling brutal death growls, you can kind of understand what he's saying. You can understand, like when he's doing the higher black metal pitch, you can understand what he's saying. It's a very, very, very catchy, memorable album, and that's why I pulled it. Yep.
I can't win, man. I muted. I found it.
Well, you forgot to do it.
Well, you know, I can't help it.
Now he'll forget how to turn it back on. He'll be like, hey, he'll have to express himself through the medium of dance for the rest of this review. But anyway, musicality and composition. Yeah, I mean, it's just very memorable. It's pop structured metal. It's this Morton guy. He's a very good songwriter. I only have the album that came out after it, which sounds like part 2 of this album. It's very, very solid, very good. The formula is very much unwavering. This could have been a double album, basically. I know after this record, I think they employed a lady to do all the vocals. I heard a later album and it was all lady singing. I did not like it as much. Kind of lost what brutal elements there were, kind of lost, but they've got a crap ton of records. I'm going to check out some here and there thanks to Spotify, but I think it's a well-written album. We're going to get into production here in a second. Obviously I picked it. I liked it. Well-written, and it's fun. There, I said it. I'm not afraid to say it's a fun record, but we'll start with you on the production, Kellen.
So one of the benefits of not like being into this kind of music is I have no bias or prejudice coming into it. So for all as like I knew the entire genre should sound like this, and maybe that's true. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is I did not have as much of an issue in terms of the production quality on this, just because I felt this would be like the normative expectation. It's kind of popish metal, so I didn't really think of it as being like, and it needed to hold up to Funeral Doom standards, Death Doom standards, or the best of symphonic black metal standards. It just needed to be this, whatever it is, and that's what I should expect. So in that regard, I actually did not have too much of an issue with the production here. I actually didn't expect it to sound dark. As soon as I heard all the twinkling pianos and big strings, I was like, this is going to be a pretty record. Absolutely a Marty pick.
You're welcome.
So in that regard, like I had no problem with the production. And I'll go say this, like, back to sort of the goth thing. Because one of the key distinctions, I think, that this record and probably those within the genre who were playing in this space between sort of gothic influences and metal is how just much of a guitar focused record, in terms of like separating it from goth. Like, I thought if you wanted to make a clear distinction as to where a goth record lived and where a metal record, it would just be at how much sort of guitar driven it would sound. And there's enough of that on this record. There's enough presence in terms of the guitar, the metal, traditional metal playing, that separates it. everything was buoyed by how much was in the background. So these sort of massive swells that reach towards a chorus, all of that was clear and present. I could hear, as potentially mechanical as it all sounded, I could hear everything clearly. So I really didn't have too much of an issue with the production here, because it was supposed to sound like a mechanical modern power metal record to some degree. And that's just kind of the place you're playing in when you're listening to a record like that. So I actually didn't have too much of a problem with the production on it.
Right on, Jim.
I think, for this genre, which, surprise, I'm not a fan of, it's adequate. It checks all the boxes. You've got your bombastic keys. You can hear them. You've got your, pretty simple riffs. They're there. You've got your, weird keys. Like, dude, that one song On the Wane, there's a moment in there that sounds like there's a Depeche Mode song. It's like, I'm taking a ride with my best friend. It's like, da, 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 and but theirs sounds like bubbles, like a piano playing bubbles, like whoop, 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 whoop. I was like, what is that? I like, who decided that was a good idea? Like, it's so awful. And there's it appears a couple times on the record, not just on the Wane. There's another song too it's on. I'm like, when would you, I can't imagine sitting in front of like a keyboard and saying, oh, this sounds like bubbles. I'm gonna put this in a song. That's
exactly why you added in there, because this sounds like bubbles.
I don't get it, man. And there's whistling, and man, I hate whistling in any genre. Like country, I love classic country. When somebody starts whistling, boom, delete.
You can't whistle, can you? That's why you're angry at whistlers.
You're right. I can't. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's subconscious. I can't stand it. Dude, Andy Griffith, I hated that show because the whole intro. And dude, there's whistling on this record. So I don't understand it. So yeah, so from a production study, can you hear the whistling? Yes, you can. It's very clear. It's right up there in your face. And unfortunately, I don't want to hear it. So it's yeah, all the things that are clear and good and sound awesome, like I don't want to hear it. The bass is clean. Yes, it's so clean. It's spick and span. It's Mr. Clean. It's terrible. It's so synthetic sounding. Yeah, if you can imagine, like, the complete opposite in production for this record, that's what I like. So this is everything I don't like about a metal album sound. And it's really hard for me to call this metal, except for the riffs and then the harsh vocals. So yeah, this isn't my thing at all. So for what it is, yeah, it works.
If you like stuff that sucks, go for it.
Yeah, but it's so created. It's I can hear the Mac whirring in the background as he's like pulling into plugins, and that it actually hurts my ears. It's so clean sounding. So if you're into this music, this is for you. But if you're somebody like me, I need to go listen to Undergone for like an hour, for a palate cleanser. So that's all I say there.
All right, DJ.
Yeah, so the synthetic drums are terrible. The fizzy guitar tone, it sucks. It all sounds like they were using real early digital stuff to me.
Sure.
I love the clear. I mean, I love that it's all clear, and it is all clear. And for the record on this, I didn't hate this record. I just there's a lot about this that I do really like. I listen to a lot of bands that you employ similar things and really enjoy, but there's just I don't know. I just had a hell of a time getting into this record over the week, and my week was a bit of a mess, and so I was having a little bit of trouble getting to put my headphones in during the week too. So I did the best I could with it, but it just wasn't connecting with me a lot. And the production, it's like it's so super clear, but then they would just listen to that stuff, and it was just losing me a lot of times. You know, so it's like, yeah, it you know, it is like, you know, like Jim says, it's like it makes some really bizarre choices with certain things. I wasn't as offended by it as Jim obviously was, but you know, I mean, it is what it is. It's like, look, man, you haven't heard any, you know, Marty and I are working on new material now. The bubble keyboards, man, I don't know.
Not out of the question.
Who knows what happens? I mean, you know, so you know, but
You got that right on the mic, and it sounds like you're dragging sandpaper across the. There you
listen, I'm just having all kinds of problems today. You know, who wants to hear me cough? Comment down below.
Go fart on it. Stick it in your asshole while you were at it. Fart on that thing once.
Listen. Just give me a break already.
You're good. It's all good.
I didn't ask for any of this trouble. Listen. So that being said, you know, yeah, the production is kind of sterile. It's clear, it's clean. I'll give them that. But it just you know, it just sounds like an early 2000s goth record. You know, I mean, it just kind of is what it is. So yeah.
Well, for me, I think the production, the drums, they sound like crap. And if you listen to Sisters of Mercy, they have a drum machine. They named it Dr. Avalanche. And it just sounds like Morton was taking the synthetic drum Dr. Avalanche thing and trying to metalize it. It's super thin, where Sisters of Mercy, the drum machine, is a very big booming sound. This is not big and booming. It's basically a timekeeper that they piled a bunch of orchestration on top of. I can overlook it. I like where the vocals sit in the mix. I like the guitar tone. Again, the delivery system for me is fine. I think it sounds good. It's heavy. I find myself air guitaring to some of these riffs. It all boils down to how catchy the music is, and it really appeals to my power metal sensibilities. It's a playful record, and it's a catchy, playful record. Could it have sounded better? It sounds very modern for the time. 2002. It's over 20 years ago, and you're right. They probably were dabbling with a lot of early digital instruments, which for the organic salt of the earth feel of metal, it's not good. It's not a good feel, but it seems to work well with what this project is from where I'm standing. If it was sounding really bad, it would really detract from these songs, but it doesn't. It just is what it is, and I enjoy it. I think it's a good album. Good sound. Perfect? No. A little too sterile, but the guitars are heavy. The vocals sound great. I really for me, that's probably the biggest thing, the vocals. Morton's vocals, he's quite proficient at growling. The black metal screams are really good, and his clean singing, it's even in the way he differs and the way he sings in the clean singing. It's interesting. But least favorite songs. Jim, we'll start with you.
You know, man, Meridian, the first song off this record, is actually a good song. I actually do like that one. And
it's a good song.
And if that like level of heaviness, I mean, there's even like some blasting on it in one section. Yeah. Like if that level of heaviness had pervaded the rest of the record, I would have liked it a lot more.
That blasting, it's a very Emperor sounding riff too, if you remember right.
It is like an
Emperor riff.
There's some black metal feel going on in Meridian for sure. Like and I was like, you know, I'm like, hey, there may be some hope here, and especially when it got to that part, you know, in the latter third of that song, and unfortunately for me, it was kind of all downhill from there, you know, and so you know, but you know, the reason why I'm not going to give this album a failing grade has much to do with the fact that Meridian is a great song, and you know, taken out of context here of the rest of the record, you know, I think a good record could have been built in this style, where like the heaviness did more to balance the cheesiness of the orchestration that was really, really off-putting to me. So Meridian, definitely my favorite song. Another one that I actually liked was the title track in Sixes and Sevens. I think there's some good riffing on that song. I love the somber violin at the beginning, and frankly, the violin across the whole of the record is another one of the things that actually, keeps it from getting a failing grade for me. The violin playing is really, really cool on this record.
Yeah.
And my ears perk up every time it makes an appearance. It's memorable, it's not just shreddy violin. It's well done. There's only like one part where I think it's a little wonky, but for the most part, the violin playing on this record is really great. I think the vocals are balanced on sixes and sevens a lot better than the rest of the record. I feel like there's again, I mentioned earlier, I don't like the call and response thing. Like, okay, dude sings, then lady sings, and then, maybe they'll get together. You don't know, I don't, it's not me. But at sixes and sevens, I feel like the vocals were balanced more. They worked together on this song instead of like being at odds with each other. It's almost like in this genre for me, the symphonic metal where they'll have a female singer either sing sometimes or all the time, with a dude like barking every once in a while. It feels like they're working against each other instead of together. And but on sixes and sevens, the title track, it actually comes together. So least favorite song is On the Wane. I'm sorry, that song it's horrible, man. The beginning of it's got this like goofy new metal, like like what is happening? Like little like bad and like wannabe industrial beat thing, and then it kicks in and it has that goofy keyboard I alluded to earlier. And then there's even that there was that really terrible thing in the early 2000s or in late 90s where a lot of like the commercial metal bands were like distorting their vocals, you know what I mean? Like singing through a distortion, but like, that like really bad. I hate that, and that's like all over at the end of On the Wane. So that song, even if you like this record, please skip that track. It is.
I liked it.
I'm sorry, that song's
Bring
terrible,
the bubbles.
man.
Bring the bubble machine. It's all good.
Disagree. And the closer, definitely not a fan of like, closing like when it's super mellow. But I love. Speaking of cheesy, I actually love the song "Gonna Get Close to You" by Queensryche off the Rage for Order album, and there is a blatant ripoff of that riff on that song on the last song. I mean, it is the exact same riff as the Queensryche song on the last one. So,
shit, I didn't catch that.
Yeah. Listen to that after we get off and tonight, and you'll hear it. But it actually makes me tolerate the tune a little better. But all in all, Meridian, really good song actually, for any band, and at sixes and sevens is a great song, and On the Wane is to coin your phrase, Marty, that one is hot garbage. So.
Hot garbage. All right, Kellen, what are your thoughts? Favorites, least
basically
favorite?
I have the exact same notes that Jim does. Specifically those three songs. No, so my preferences for the opener Meridian has to do with that is the best realization of black metal on this record. Sixes and sevens for me is the best sort of death doom or funeral doom portion of this record. And On the Wane is this strange electronica thing happening. So, I mean, those are my rationale. So I just want to highlight those are my favorite tracks and least favorite. So for almost the exact same reason there. I was going to stretch to have another one. I think Manic Aeon is another one that I liked on this record towards the end. But yeah, the title track is the doomiest sort of intro that sort of builds appropriately. So I think in terms of concentrating their sort of death doom or funeral doom influences, that's the track to lean into. If you're interested in terms of how they're incorporating extreme sort of symphonic elements, the opener is the best one. And On the Wane is a strange mistake. So I'll just back off there and say those are my favorite and least favorite tracks.
Okay. TJ.
Yeah, so those guys are cheating off my paper apparently. So Yeah, faves. Meridian at 6s and 7s. I did kind of like Lethargica, kind of, sort of, and then at least On the Wane, just kind of whatever. Again, I struggled to connect with the record overall. I didn't hate it. I just wasn't really feeling it, so it was just kind of, overall, I didn't get a real negative anything. It was just kind of like, okay, here it is, whatever. But I think, and for the points that they pointed out, especially the opener and the title track, those songs are kind of indicative of the best points that they deliver on. And the record overall. So yeah.
I have a lot of notes. Meridian's my favorite song on the album, hands down. It's a moving piece of music. I really love the way the vocals interact with the chord progressions, and there's added power in the arpeggiated synth lines. It's cheesy but effective Black Death vocals work well together. It's definitely the best song on here. Follow-up track, Sister Nightfall. This song reminds me of Dance on the Grave's Little Sister off of Sentenced Amok album. It's got that rockin' kind of vibe. I love the unassuming innocence in, how you say it? Fabiana's, I don't know, vocal style. Works well with the varying male styles the choirs bring. A big aura to the music. I really dig that. On the Wane, endlessly catchy chorus and flow in the overall musical presentation. Morton's vocals playfully accent this memorable motion in the song perfectly. Love the choirs. Is that the one with the bubble attack? Yeah. Or was that in the no, in Amanica? Even more definite pop sensibility in the songwriting. It works here. The song feels light and easy to process, making it very catchy. The synth lines and the sound of the synths make me think of the X-Files. Title track. It's the longest track on the album. It's definitely the doomiest track. It's slower, yet no less hooky. More atmosphere enters this track, and even a hint of melancholy, which they really do struggle to get there on this record. It's, like I said, an afterthought. Lethargica feels like a Vision Thing era Sisters of Mercy track with its more rocking feel. Morton even attempts his best Andrew Eldritch impersonation. Again, amazing chorus. Least favorite song for me is Manic Aeon. Still like it, and again, very memorable, but this one lacks the punch of the rest of the album. The last two tracks, Shadow of Your Own Self, it's a good song, a bit more cut and dried, still worthy and catchy. And then they end it on In Sumerian Haze. It's a very somber ending. I'm assuming I thought it was cello lines, but it's probably just violin. I thought it was kind of a cool way, since the whole album is kind of straight ahead. There isn't a whole lot of differentiation other than the title track. It was kind of cool to end on yet another moment of melancholy. Go out with kind of your head down, as opposed to deciding which dragon you're going to ride into the horizon type of situation. But so yeah, Judgment, final thoughts. Jim, I know where you stand. We're going to start with you first.
First, I'm going to say I got a correction. That moment of Queen's Rock ripoff is actually at the very, very end of On the Wane. I just had it on the. It wasn't the last song. I put On the Wane on the last in my notes anyway.
Right
just a middle note. So yeah, if you're a fan of this style, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe it's good. I don't know. But it's really hard for me to say, all right, to give this a poor rating, because I just don't like the kind of music. I do think that this guy is obviously a talented musician. I just don't like what he puts out. You know what I mean? So, having said that, I do think that the musicians around him deliver the material he's written, or actually add flourishes to it that made it or kept it from failing completely. And that would be, Fabian's vocal and the violins specifically. So for me, it's on the strength of those two instruments alone, and Meridian and at 6s and 7s, I can give this a C-, but I can't go any higher.
Right on. TJ.
Yeah, the record gets a C. I think it's a good record. I think there's a lot of talent here. The vocals, you know, male and female, are really good. I think the vision of what he's trying to do stylistically is cool. But his particular flavor and taste for the way he brings it across doesn't really appeal to me that greatly. I totally get why you like this record so much, and I think that's, I mean, and I totally get it. Like I say, I
He
think
likes
it's a good
dancing in the
record.
moonlight.
Yeah, you know, that's his thing lately, is just to make me happy, or make himself, you know, happy metal stuff. And I'm looking forward to the day when that phase dies in him, and you know, and he comes, you know, he comes back to the fold of, you know, let's listen to our metal and suffer inside.
Well, I still have that too. I just I prefer to have fun lately to music when I listen to music.
Well, I'm having fun too, you know, sitting in the dark, being miserable. Yeah, so, you know, I don't think it's a bad record by any stretch. You know, my grade on it is, you know, more of my personal taste and my nitpicks overall. I think it's definitely worth people's time to check it out. But, you know, I just think it, you know, I give it a C, because I think he could have done better. I think, you know, they could have pushed into the heavier elements better. I think they could have, you know, arranged some of this stuff a little bit differently. But, you know, by and large, you know, that's kind of my take on it. So, yeah.
Kellen.
So I have less of a judgment of this record and more just a general statement about the genre. I'm kind of open-minded here. So I did see that this was a very popular album within the genre, but I know very little about it. So nothing about this record dissuaded me from potentially like listening to it again, or even pursuing further if people have recommendations like, oh, this record doesn't do it well, you should check out blank. I'm open to be, you know, curious to check it out. So if I saw this in a store, I wouldn't necessarily pick it up, but at this point, like, I'm also maybe would stream it again, and there's stuff about this that has me curious. So anyway, that's not really a statement about this record as much as it is sort of like the genre, but change of pace, something different. I wasn't privy to the Anastasia or whatever record, so this is
Avantasia. Oh, it was awesome,
dude.
So,
Yeah.
It will be forever referred to as Anastasia from now on.
I fail to hear the difference, really, but you know, whatever.
But yeah. In that regard, like, something new and different, and got us, you know, talk about something that, well, we aren't used to. So yeah, in that sense, it was a cool record to listen to this week.
Yep, I love the record, and I'm not gonna lie, I've listened to it a lot this week, and I'm not putting it away. I'm gonna probably listen to it some more next week, and it applies to it appeals to my more upbeat sensibilities musically lately. So, yep, I like the playful songwriting, the super memorable choruses. It works all the way around, and there's brutal vocals mixed with clean. It's just a good mix. The overall genre, I have to take it band to band basis. I can't give this all a pass. Like bands like Lacuna Coil, Epica, even some Nightwish. I have on a Gothic metal mix, Tristania, whatever band this guy came from. What is it called? I can never remember. Tristania. I heard a couple songs I actually kind of like, so that might be their first couple records. I might actually have to investigate that just to see what it's all about. But I don't see myself going too super crazy in this genre, but I really do enjoy this record and the one after it as well. After that, tread lightly, because it's not great. It's not great, but that's it. And who picks for next week?
Well, let's see.
I thought it was.
I
it
picked
me?
last, and you. So does it go back to
It was
Kellen, or?
Gorgoroth, then your pick,
Karsha,
right?
Yeah.
Karsha,
I think it is
Karsha.
Kellen.
So it's Kellen's turn.
It's Kellen. Yep.
All right.
Sweet.
Oh,
I am
fire.
fire
Okay.
surrounded by thieves.
I would have rather
Alright.
had the first one, but this was good too. The
Well,
first
we're
one.
here to be
Rushes.
challenged.
I'm sure all of us would rather have not listened to Sirenia at 6 but here we are.
Here we are, or Metallica. Yeah, here we are. That'll be fun. It'll be a good one. And yes, thank you for listening to Sirenia. I mean, I know it was a hard sell, and I knew it would get some backlash, but I figured it would be a different genre to tackle for sure. And High on Fire, that's a fun one. It'll be a good one. Bringing out the big guns. Yes, yes. Next Wednesday, I will not be here. Alan will be taking my place, so I will be missing this episode. But yeah, we'll be here Friday. I will not be here as well. So Alan and Aaron, the Metal Theologian, are doing something on New Wave of British Heavy Metal. There might be a guest. Don't know exactly for sure, but please tune in and hang out with those guys and give them some love. And for those of you going to the show in Kentucky, we will see you there. Come up to the table and say hi. Yeah. Anybody have anything to add before we jump?
See everybody in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Right on.
Support the
Cool.
dead.
Oh, Alan says Jurgen. It'll be Jurgen. Jurgen will be on with those guys talking about New Wave of British Heavy Metal. That'll be a good show. Awesome. Yep. I'll be at Halloween with my kid next Wednesday. So gonna be fun.
Nice.
Anyway, cheers everybody. We will see you later. Have a good one. Thanks for joining us.